and welcome to the Star Cafe here on EBN. I'm Penny Smith. Ahead on the programme we'll be reviewing last week's Grammy Awards, and as always we'll have the latest from the trenches of pop culture with the EBN Style File. But first, it could have something to do with the fact that last year was the 40th anniversary of Playboy, or maybe it was that designers were thinking about glamour again. But somewhere in the collective subconsciousness of the zeitgeist, people were thinking romantically about the 50s. Suddenly, Manhattans were being poured, Diamante mules were being donned, and kitchen supply stores were doing a brisk trade in the sale of cocktail shakers. The louche life of lounge culture is on the rise. Here's a brief look at the evolution of a happening trend.
Lounge music is music to lounge by. It's music that you can relax with.
I think there's been a revival in the lounge music scene because people have been tired of going out to clubs and hearing the same thing. I think maybe they want an alternative.
Lounge music for me is a mixture of syrupy strings, screaming brass sections, and classic croon. So it's a mixture of vocals and instrumentals, which started originally in the 50s and picked up in pop in the 60s and 70s and has existed throughout those eras.
What we've been hearing about is a lot of different scenes springing up at the same time in a lot of different countries. We understand there's quite a big scene on the west coast of America, in Hamburg, and also across Europe.
In lounge music, we're only now just developing contacts with people. The most interesting one that I heard about is a place called the Hammond Inferno, which is run by some young men in Berlin. And obviously, the great thing about Berlin is that they have really old nightclubs in the East that have not been developed in the way that modern nightclubs have been. So like JoJo's here, they have a lot of velvet and a much more comfortable old world feel, and that tradition is a really nice thing to be part of.
I do believe people are making space for themselves to actually relax, get together under a more sociable environment, which maybe is a bit against the grain of London life. And now there's pockets of people getting together where kind of lounge music from London, States, Germany, it's all coming together. We're hearing like music.
"私猫と一緒に3時間も待っていたのよ私猫と一緒に」「トリッキーのミニスカートでトリッキーみたいなポーズでトリッキーのミニスカートでトリッキーみたいに痩せこっちの私」その時電話のベルが私猫みたいに喋ったテレビのボリューム下げて私嘘みたいな声で
It's definitely about people and conversation and their clothes and just being able to relax with your friends in a club environment.
The 50s thing has come back now because we had a period where really loud music, people dancing, trance music, and eventually, in the end, it just goes back up its bottom, doesn't it? And what you really want to do is to try something completely different. A cult or trend comes along, it's the complete opposite of the thing that's gone before. It's really easy to pick up on this. But in some ways, these people have been trying to set up, they want to make money. They're setting up discos and things like that. It's so much easier to do a lounge culture thing because you're not causing any trouble. You're people are going to buy drinks, look nice, well, nearly nice. They're going to look. But maybe it's got something to do with the new law that's come out in England. You're not allowed to listen to more than 7 people listening to a repetitive beat because you're certainly not having that. There's no drugs involved. It's clean. It's wholesome.
Now here to discuss the lounge revival is Dougee Dimensional from The Gentle People, Chris Long, a collector of easy listening music, and finally journalist Stephen Armstrong, spotter of trends and general lounge music enthusiast. Dougee, who exactly are The Gentle People?
Well, the Gentle People we're kind of a modern day electronic listening group, is what I guess you'd define it.
Right, the lounge music group.
Lounge music group for 1990s, I would say, electronically based, and but into relaxing,
Right, Chris, when did you first start collecting?
About 10 years ago.
And what sort of music do you collect? We're talking about it being easy listening. What do you think is easy listening?
Easy listening to me, yes, is soothing, relaxing, lush strings, but I don't really go for that. I go for the when it tickles you with a feather and hits you over the head with a hammer with these kind of brassy sounds, and anything that is a bit off-centre as well, a bit strange.
So hit us with a few names that none of us will ever have heard of.
Well, Esquivel is my big, and I'm a #1 fan of him. He's like, he's a pianist, like Liberace, but kind of a bit nutty. And then there's Bob Thompson, Dean Elliott, Les Baxter, Martin Denny. There are, 50 or so of the really great people that you can buy.
Stephen, do you go for those sort of easy listening types?
I'm afraid I'm more mainstream. I get scared by lists of names. It's like easy core. It's hard to find getting to the real extreme. I'm stuck in your sort of Mancini and Burt Bacharach sort of level of lounge, really. The big production orchestra numbers that without voice and just kind of the big washes of strings and so forth coming forward. I'm afraid that's my personal favourite.
You find the voices slightly irritating?
I don't find them irritating, I just don't think they're necessary. What I really love is listening to, particularly in some of the orchestra arrangements, in the way that the instruments overlay and then the sort of the whole arrangement of it all, and that's why I think a song's as good as the arranger. So you can have 50 versions of the same song, 2 of them are good and 48 are rubbish, and that's because someone's arranged it right and put the instruments together in the right way.
Dougee, would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would agree with that, because it's a lot of times you'll get millions of versions of, say a Little Prayer on an album, but there'll be one version that just comes out and says, yeah, and that is due to the arranging. It's been done by hundreds of people.
Now, can you narrow this lounge music down to a certain era of time? Could you say late 50s, early 60s, or is it not quite like that?
Well, I think it goes anywhere from like the 50s to like the mid 70s even. Because a lot of the stuff that I like is usually like in the later 60s, easy listening, early 70s, which when they start experimenting with more electronic noises like Moog and, just kind of strange organ sounds.
Sorry, what is Moog?
Moog is like the kind of like analog
It's like a
synthesizer.
Yeah, synthesizer.
Right, sorry, I'm
synthesizer.
so deeply unhip and trendy, obviously.
The
Now,
weird Roxy Music sounds are all done on
That's
those
right.
and stuff.
oh right.
Kind of like, the science fiction sounds that you hear,
Yeah.
like in,
Yeah.
say, Lost in Space and things like that,
And the Doctor Who theme and
Yeah.
stuff, the real sort of...
Yeah.
Right. Now, the clothes are obviously very important. Here you are wearing, I presume it's 100% polyester,
Yeah,
is
I
it
think
that?
it is.
Yes, it certainly looks like it's bringing a few sparks off the off the sofa. Particularly important clothing?
For me it is. I mean, I don't think, just because you're into easy listening doesn't mean that you have to dress this way. It's just, this is kind of like the way I like to look. So, and I happen to like easy listening as well.
Do you find polyester a problem, though?
No, not at all.
Not
I love
too
it.
hot?
Not usually. I mean, wear a cotton t-shirt underneath, so you're okay.
Yeah. Now, what about your family? Do they also join you in this passion?
A little bit. My mother likes easy listening. I mean, I think I probably got into it a little bit from listening to the kind of things that she used to listen to when I was very young, kind of Dionne Warwick or what have you.
Right, and how about you?
For clothes.
No, I was actually thinking about sort of how, when you got into it when you were younger.
Yeah, I kind of raided my dad's record collection, and since then I've found that me and him kind of are quite close, and it's a scary thing to realise that you and your father have the same taste.
Yeah, you've actually forgotten to be a rebel somewhere along
That's
the line.
right. Maybe I did, and it just has gone. But I picked out one of his yesterday, and I'd been looking for it for ages, and he had it. I mean, he started listening to it again now.
Oh, I was going to say, so you haven't taken it?
No, he's started to kind of listen again, I think, with new ears, really.
So when you were young, presumably you were completely out of it, out of the rest of the scene.
I kept up a
facade.
A facade, basically a facade. I went through it all from. I used to buy Gary Glitter and the rest of that stuff, and punk and all of the things.
You were that cool and groovy kid.
Well, must have been.
And now here you are at the cutting edge.
That's right.
Right, well, we'll be coming back to this discussion in a few minutes, where we'll be joined by Adweek pop culture columnist Barbara Lippert from our New York studios. You're with the Star Cafe on EBN. Welcome back to the Star Cafe here on EBN, where we've been discussing the imminent explosion of cocktail culture. I'm now joined by Barbara Lippert, pop culture columnist for Adweek, who's in our New York studios. Good evening.
Good evening.
Have you had your first martini of the evening then?
Yes, very dry.
Now tell us about the explosion of lounge music over in New York and over in America.
Well, I see it sort of as Tony Bennett Grammy envy. There's just sort of this explosion of Tony Bennett, and I think it might have started, Harry Connick Jr., MTV Unplugged, the idea that Bono was singing with Frank Sinatra, and we've had this huge embrace of Las Vegas. Las Vegas has become incredibly popular. So it goes across. Even families in windbreakers are visiting Las Vegas. So I think that Tony Bennett really dominates TV these days.
So tell us about the situation in the clubs over there then.
I think it's, sort of a way of cocooning, but still showing your wardrobe, still showing, your body and your bustier. I think it's people, after a lot of metal sound, they're looking for something that's easier. It's kind of a subversive sound to very young people, because it's the music of their parents and their grandparents and, rumba lessons in the basement and all that. And for very, very exhausted baby boomers, it's sort of a way of nostalgically, with a little bit of irony, relaxing.
So you think it was a sort sort of reaction against all the house music and that kind of thing?
I think it is. Eventually it just gets too fast and too frenzied and too much. And when people, eventually you just react to that by staying home, and then you get tired of staying home, so then you're looking for something else.
Right, so the fact is, of course, it's not intrusive, basically.
It's not intrusive, and it's funny because it really is the music of a post-war generation that was full of like sort of hope and romance and the feeling that everything would get better.
It's not very reactionary, though, is it? Let's face it, children are supposed to be reactionary, aren't they?
We are living in a very reactionary time, especially here in the United States. Things are getting extremely right-wing. It's a little scary. But I don't think Tony Bennett is right-wing. The other thing about this, it's like old gangster music. When you think about the chairman of the board and Frank Sinatra and Tony Bennett, I mean, these guys are kind of scary. And when you see Tony Bennett singing with Katie Lang, you have to wonder, like, which twin has the Tony?
Now, what about the commercial knock-on from this? Do you think there's going to be like going back to 40s and 50s?
Absolutely. There's a huge new interest in 50s furniture. There's a sort of colonial furniture company named Ethan Allen, who is a major colonial figure in our history, and they have a new line of 50s furniture called the Radius line. 50s reproductions are very big. Minimalism is coming back. The kind of idea of a 50s basement with knotty pine is coming back.
And presumably things like soda bars are going to be big business, and ice cream parlors.
Probably. I mean, even the big ice cream parlors, even the idea of coffee bars is sort of very beatniky 50s, the other side of the 50s.
Now, yes, carry on.
And, coffee bars are huge, huge in New York right now, and you can almost see someone in the corner with a beret and bongos.
But is this a style of culture, if you like, that is really limited to the big cities, to New York and Los Angeles?
Well, I do think that with cable television and MTV and shopping malls, it's sort of become very homogenized. And I think that whatever people are doing in the big cities is pretty much everywhere in America now. And, I have a friend who lives in a farmhouse in Pennsylvania, and he just got, this sort of ovary-shaped red couch in his living room. So,
this, of course, is music that was popularly seen almost as lobotomy music. Has it got big ironic quotation marks around it, if you like?
Well, I think even Tony Bennett is sort of shaking his gray head and wondering what prompted this sudden surge of interest in him, because even 5 years ago it was like bad Bill Murray lounge act. It was a joke. And now it's like sort of people like, maybe a cross between Eric Clapton, doing his acoustic stuff and Bill Murray lounge act. For some reason, there's just something very welcoming and soothing and comforting, a combination of the soft sound of it, nostalgia, and not the sort of easy listening, mellow stuff that was so embarrassing in the 70s and 80s.
And of course, clothes are particularly important, it seems.
Oh yes, all of the accessories are coming back. For women, very, very fitted, corseted outfits, very much like some of the stuff in the 50s when people actually dressed up and went to nightclubs.
Yeah, easy listening, I read in one particular newspaper, it was easy listening is the most fun you can have without taking off your slippers.
Yeah, exactly. And this idea of this cocktailing, it's, sort of cocooning while showing off your wardrobe and not really having to have anything in the kitchen.
So this seems to have been a bit of a quiet revolution. Over here it's probably taken about 3 years. What about over there? Has it been going a bit longer?
No, I think it's probably the same, and I think that it's still going to happen, and I think it's still getting stronger. I think people who are redoing their homes to look sort of Jetsonian or 50s are just starting to do that now. They're taking out all of those Martha Stewart touches, with big drapey things and getting much more stark and minimal.
And also a good excuse for music companies to get rid of their back catalogues and shift a few old CDs.
Absolutely, and when you think about what those covers look like and the kinds of colors they used and the kinds of graphics they used and the kind of clothing the people had, they all look wonderful these days. There's something really fresh and funny about it.
Yeah, very retro, and presumably it's also going to go throughout the entire social stratosphere, as it were. You're going to start seeing adverts that are very much more 50s and 60s.
Absolutely. We already see a lot of adverts, a lot of liquor and hard liquor is being sold to Generation X and baby boomers in a way that it never was before, in a way that it would make sense in their lives. These are ex-hippies. And it's funny because basically what we do is we just go through the, sort of grave rob from the past. And the 50s is a very, very rich area that we haven't really revisited except in I Love Lucy.
So what do you think we'll be plundering next then, the 1920s?
No, I think the 50s will have a strong go because it's 40 years ago and a lot of the people around now, were born even 20 years later. So it seems like ancient history.
Barbara Lippert, thanks very much for talking to us this evening.
Thank
Barbara
you.
Lippert in New York. You're watching The Style Cafe on EBN. Back in a moment. Welcome back to the Style Cafe here on EBN. I'm Penny Smith and I'm joined by Dougee Dimensional of The Gentle People, Chris Long, a collector of easy listening music, and Stephen Armstrong, a journalist covering things pop culture. But before we go any further with our lounge discussion, we're going over to Rainer Schmidt with the EBN Style File.
EBN Style File, I'm Rainer Schmidt. In the headlines, Virgin buys out, Bespoke hits Berlin, and an enterprising credit card venture. But first, make-up company of the moment, MAC Cosmetics of Canada, turned the traditionally conservative industry on its head last week when they announced that drag queen Rupaul would be the new face behind their line of glam paint and powder. Foregoing the predictable supermodel route currently dominated by the likes of Claudia Schiffer and Cindy Crawford at Revlon, MAC decided that the 6.5-foot, all-singing, all-dancing drag queen would gather more attention than your average garden variety sex goddess. Dressed in a pink 60s jumpsuit and pink fun fur, Rupaul did more than attract attention at the launch party at New York department store Henry Beddles last week. She backed traffic up all the way to Central Park, said a reporter for the American network E! Entertainment Television. MAC, which is unique in the cosmetics industry because it doesn't advertise, is currently expanding its operation in Europe and recently opened its first freestanding store on London's King's Road. Watch for them to expand into France and Germany in the coming year. Trendy boutique airline Virgin Atlantic will become the first European carrier to ban smoking on all of its routes except Tokyo from May the 1st. Following extensive research and customer surveys that showed there was a demand for completely non-smoking on the heavily traveled Los Angeles, New York and Florida routes, Virgin decided to ban smoking on all flights, apart from their Japan route, because non-smoking hasn't exactly caught on as a marketing concept in Tokyo. Spearheading a trend that got its start on international flights with Air Canada, Stylefile doesn't expect Air France or Alitalia to follow suit anytime soon. The Bank of Scotland is boldly going where no other major European bank has gone before, with the debut of their Star Trek Affinity MasterCard. Not to be mistaken with the National Hairdressers Federation MasterCard or the Amnesty International MasterCard, the Star Trek version is hoping to attract both graying Trekkies who watched the series the first time around when Captain Kirk was at the helm, and the next generation of big spenders who are more familiar with the 90s Captain Picard version of the show. Not to be left behind, the civil war-torn state of Liberia has just licensed the rights to produce Star Trek coins, which will be legal tender in the West African country. Currency speculation on the part of Trekkies just might help reverse the country's non-existent economy. British men's store Hackett is about to expand their continental operations with the opening of Berlin and Paris branches over the next year. Having already entered the Japanese and Spanish markets, Hackett already has a strong following both in France and Germany. Selling traditional, tailored British menswear, Hackett's prices for a classic 3-button suit start at around £450. And finally, if the winter has hardened your squash balls, a company out of the UK called Hurlstone has just released Hot Ball, a battery-operated mobile phone-sized device that heats your balls to a toasty 30 to 35 degrees Celsius, the perfect temperature for a brisk game of squash. That's all from us here at the EBN Style File. I'm Rainer Schmidt.
Thank you, Rainer. Well, we're still talking lounge music here. Now, Stephen, when did you first notice as a freelance music journalist that this was definitely a new trend?
The first style in terms of whether people dressing I saw was a comedian called Bob Down, who dressed in the ultimate sort of false hair and big cheesy grin. But in terms of the first club that I encountered was a club called Yes Jude, which operated in and around Oxford Street for a few years. It actually reached its peak at a club called Eve's, which is where the Profumo scandal took place in the 60s, and the club had been left pretty much as it was. They'd mothballed it, and someone dug it out at the back of a shop, and they opened it up and ran their night from there. But they were probably they used to cross Northern Soul with a DJ who had the Karminsky Experience. They used to play in one room and have a Northern Soul room and stuff like that. So that wasn't pure in its percent, but you could see that sort of love of the kind of the funkier side of the existing stuff coming through. You'd get the Italian Job soundtrack and so forth played there. And then it started to spread out. I mean, it may have been going in other places there, but that was the first time I encountered it personally.
Have you encountered it anywhere else apart from London? I mean, we saw one man talking about the fact it was Berlin, Hamburg, and London, and a little bit in Japan. Is that right? Oh, and of course the States.
Yeah.
But is that basically the extent of it?
As far as I know, I mean, as far as I've been to San Francisco recently, and I've got friends in New York, and from what they tell me in New York, and from what I've seen in San Francisco, it does seem like it's starting to happen. There's definitely like easy listening venues there, kind of places, tiki bars, and just kind of nice 50s type lounges.
And can you mostly see people who are of like minds when you spot their delicious polyester outfits?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's definitely, I've seen a lot of people that just look like, wow, easy listening. Kind of bouffant hairdos and kind of, leisure suits and things.
And you don't think they're people perhaps caught in a time warp?
No, I just think it's, what they like to wear.
So take us through a typical evening at a lounge club. There you are, you go in, you've dressed for the evening, and you go in and the music's just as you like it. What next?
Well, I mean, I'd probably hit the bar first, sit down, relax, meet a few friends, or like see some of my friends, and just kind of enjoy. They either have live shows depending on which venue you're going to, or just relax, maybe have a dance, if you feel like it.
Yeah, and you've even got you've actually got a record deal, haven't you?
Well, we've got a single coming out, a single deal, which will be out in a month on Reflex. But it's kind of like a ambient electronic avant-garde label.
And do you think it'll manage to get mainstream?
Oh, definitely, I think so.
You definitely think so?
I don't want to say like our music is, mainstream or what have you, but I mean, I think there's a big pop element in it, because that's, we're just making music that we like, and we like a lot of poppy, easy type of, relaxation kind of music.
And Chris definitely does. How does it feel? You're just about to be trendy.
That's right. It's finally caught up with me, I'm afraid. And I reckon I'll have to get my tuxedo on and dig out my old Playboys for some style.
So Playboy is definitely stylish, is it?
Oh, I think so, yeah.
What, you carry a rolled up copy of Playboy over your Financial Times?
Yeah, I think so. But, now that it's so seriously, it couldn't get any more unhip. I think it's time to bring it back, really.
So how much do you think your collection is worth?
Maybe a few
thousand,
maybe.
Really? And what would it have been worth 3 years
probably
ago?
about a few hundred, really, if that. But prices are really going up now, sky high.
Give us an example.
Well, if you want, say, an Esquivel 1968 album, which is only on RCA in Mexico, that's got to be about £500.
Really?
If you really wanted one.
A serious collector's
They're
item.
so hard to find.
Yeah, who knows? You might be like that in sort of 50 years' time, Dougee. Now, Let's just talk about what else you could actually go for. Barbara was talking about the fact that this was not just music, that this was also going through the whole of the whole style element. Do you find that the style of the 1950s and 1960s is your style as well? Do you live in a house full of 1950s items?
Well, my house is mostly like kind of 60s and plastic, because that's what I like. But I mean, I've always kind of been into that anyway. I mean, I like 50s stuff as well, but it's just kind of, this is what I'm into, and that's, I haven't like consciously gone out of my way to say, oh, I'm going to start collecting 50s things. It's just like things that I've always kind of liked, and 60s TV and all that kind of thing.
Yeah, and talking about the lounge clubs, of course, there's always been a kind of drug, no matter what it is, even if it's alcohol, that's been associated with a certain kind of music, if you like. Is this really going back to the martinis, really?
I think that what you probably find is that anyone who's at a lounge club will not necessarily, I think a lot of people there won't see that as their exclusive nights out. The only thing they'll do is go to lounge clubs, because there's going to be a lot of cross-fertilisation. I mean, I think that I personally think the lounge scene, a lot of that was prompted by things like chill-out rooms at house clubs, where you'd get kind of a more mellow atmosphere there. And so I think you'll probably find that lots of people who'll be going to Indigo on Tuesdays may be out somewhere else entirely on Saturdays, and they may be doing a more standard conventional house night, and just going on for it's not necessarily exclusive in terms of that. So you could say, well, those people might just be drinking martinis there, but on Saturday night, who knows what they'll be what they'll be using to stimulate themselves.
Right. We'll be coming back to this in a while. The cocktail hour continues here at the Style Cafe. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Style Cafe here on EBN, where we're waiting for the martinis to be poured. Unfortunately, there seems to be no sign of the waiter yet, but we shall carry on in the interim. Do you think this is a cultural reaction against grunge, really? This is the return of smart people?
I don't think it's like exactly against grunge, but I mean, I do think it's another alternative out there available to people. People are tired of a lot of people are tired of rock music, or get bored of like the house music scene. And I just kind of think, there's a legitimate music that, that does have some merit in it. For me, listening to it is like a new experience for me. And I think, I don't necessarily think it's completely retro.
I also think that, I mean, in a sense, what you've got is a kind of whilst I don't want to sort of dismiss this as saying it's an ironic thing purely, but what you have, I think, a lot culturally at the moment, and this is where it doesn't apply necessarily in Europe, but where the Generation X things come from in America, is this kind of lack of trust or lack of faith in any of the contemporary idols that you've got, or any of the contemporary sort of things that are given to you. And so some people go one way, whereas they'll go into a sort of a grunge culture where they'll cut themselves off completely from society, or they'll become travelers. Others may go back to a different time where there was more sort of faith and more believable things, and that's why you'll see things like the NAF icons being used in house music, in house music flyers and so forth. You'll see sort of Ted Rogers being used, to promote a club, and so it's drawing out on these things. There's adverts which are using these kinds of things, hideously NAF people, but it's this kind of feeling that, okay, they are naff, but it's a recognisable element to them. There's something definite there that you know about. And whether that's naffness, whatever it is, that I think today people find things are too uncertain, and you don't trust your politicians, you don't trust what's going on, so you look for something more solid.
Like Ted Rogers.
Well, you know where you are with Ted Rogers, don't you? You know that he's a fool.
Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think in the States it does come from all that Forrest Gump thing about going back to a simpler, earlier time. And if I think you're distanced from it, you're not, because it's either happened 10, 20, 30 years ago, you don't feel like you have so much kind of
trying to help you.
Take it less seriously, perhaps.
Yeah.
It can be,
Well, more. I hesitate to say it again, but in fact, what I was saying to Barbara about it comes with big ironic quotation marks around it. Is that really?
Yeah,
really
I think it does. I think the people who first pick up those things are doing it ironically, and then of course, as it goes on, people are going to get more serious about it, and those boundaries of the irony is going to be blurred somewhat.
I suppose what you say is, if you were literally the people who are currently listening to lounge music, if they were literally doing, those are the same people who were living in the 50s, they'd probably be the kind of people who, like, the whole McCarthy witch hunt thing was against, and who would be seen as unnecessary to society.
Subversive.
In lots of ways. Yeah, and so I think that it's not a question of people swallowing those things whole, and the whole 50s thing is saying that was a fantastic time. You select the things that you want from it and create your own kind of, that's why you talk about a 90s version perhaps, because you're creating your own interpretation of things. So you're not seriously saying, we want to live in that time, we want to be that kind of thing.
Because you can't recreate that.
Yeah.
You're going to have to move on and add a bit of that to what's going on now. And that's what it should be. That's more creative that way.
What music were you into before, Dougie, before you got into this? What sort of music did you like to listen to?
Well, I'm into lots of different types of music, but I mean, I've always kind of liked soundtrack music. I mean, that's something that goes back, like, you know, from the time I was about 10, and I used to play the trumpet, so I was really into, like, Henry Mancini and things like that. But then, you know, I kind of like a lot of techno and, like, hard house and rock. I've kind of got into a lot of indie music for a while. It's just kind of, you know, I like everything. I'm not going to be, you know, discriminating and say, oh, I like this, I don't like that. But, you know.
And you're probably not going to get stuck in this then either. You'll probably move on.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, this is something that I'm into, I think, but, you know, the music we're making right now is the stuff that we want to hear right now, and it's like, you know, maybe after we make it, we might get into other things.
I mean, I'm glad that this has all come out, actually. I'm quite relieved, because it means that the more stuff that gets re-released, more people will discover it, and
you can stop being the train spotter of the music world.
Well, that's right.
Right, we're back in a moment. You're with the Style Cafe. Stay with us. Watching the Style Cafe here on EBN. Now, talking about lounge music, continuing to talk about lounge music, do you think that the people who are into it are from all socio-economic backgrounds, or do you think there's a certain type?
I think that in general, your style leaders tend to be sort of perhaps defined by geography, perhaps more than by social class. But I think you'll probably find people who are kind of living in the central city or you know, that kind of thing, and those tend to be people who perhaps where class isn't necessarily relevant, where people will get together simply because of the place they live rather than the jobs they have or so on. But I imagine that because adapting to a style means that you have to spend quite a lot of money, I imagine it's tricky to do it without any kind of financial support whatsoever.
Yeah.
I think you can do it on a cheap budget, you know. Hit the second-hand markets, you know, there's plenty of polyester out there. There's loads of records, like I say, 50p, you know, pick them up.
Right. And do you actually think that most people go to listen, or is it actually a mixture of people who go to listen and people who go to be seen and to be trendy?
Yeah, I think it's probably both. I mean, if somebody wants to pick up on, you know, they either have listened to something and they like it, and they want to hear more, then that's obviously the place to go. No real commercial radio stations are playing the exact type of easy listening that I think you hear in the clubs. Not even melody, no, they're probably a bit too straight. Yeah, to go and see and, you know, meet friends, I guess.
Yeah, I think it's like a real social thing, at least for me, as far as, you know, I've been going to the clubs for about 3.5 years, and it's like the first clubs I can go to where I've actually meet people and talk to them and have a really nice time, and it's not like the music isn't like in your face, you know, it's, you can have a dance if you want to, but you can get away from it, and, you know, it's kind of a good thing.
I think with a lot of the sort of large house clubs, there was a tendency to put clubs in huge warehouse-sized rooms where even if you went to the same club every week, you'd be unlikely to necessarily pass the same person more than once every 6 months. In these places, they're smaller venues, more intimate, and what you find is, because there's a smaller group of people who are aficionados of that, the same people will see each other a lot, and you'll friends will grow out of that, and people know each other, will nod each other. Because lots of people live in and around the central London, you actually probably see people in the clubs just out in the same bars and the same cafes, having a coffee somewhere, and you'll recognise them, and that's how it becomes more social, perhaps. Then.
Now, what words are typical of lounge music culture?
Cheesy.
Cheesy. Cheesy and sleazy.
Swinging.
Swinging.
Yeah.
Cheesy sounds unattractive. Is it supposed to be unattractive?
There must be a slight element of horror when you listen for the first time, maybe, or see somebody in a polyester suit for the first time. But you soon warm to it, I think.
So did you meet Dougee and think cheesy? Is that what you would say, or would you say swinging?
Yeah, definitely swinging, I think.
Swinging and cheesy.
Yeah.
No.
Well, look, thank you very much, Dougee Dimensional, Chris Long, Stephen Armstrong. Thank you very much for talking about this new trend, swinging or cheesy. Now, Mr. Lounge himself, Tony Bennett, did well at the Grammys last week, as did Bruce Springsteen and Sheryl Crow. Sandra Gaudenzi reports.
Bruce Springsteen led off the 37th annual Grammy Award last Wednesday night in Los Angeles with his emotional rendition of Streets of Philadelphia, theme song from the 1993 film Philadelphia about a lawyer with AIDS.
Bruce Springsteen!
Springsteen and rising star Sheryl Crow were crowd favorites.
Sheryl Crow.
Crow took home a Grammy for Best New Artist and for Record of the Year, as well as for the Best Female Pop Vocal Performance. Boyz II Men claimed the Grammy for the Best R&B Album with a lot of thanks.
We think that would be a beautiful thing, not only to give back to the people, but to give back to the Lord, to give him what he deserves, and that's his time.
Yeah, we don't want the public to kind of put Boyz II Men in the category where they can only sing certain kinds of music. Like Juan said, we listen to everything, and if possible, we'd like to sing everything.
Tony Bennett and K.D. Lang had been tipped to get the award for Best Pop Vocal Duo, but were beaten by R&B veteran Al Green and country star Lyle Lovett.
It's been a long time.
Green says their winning songs, Funny How Time Slips Away, is a mix of American music styles.
That's like the traditional, original beginning of so many wonderful things in pop, rhythm and blues, country, which is where we got this song.
San Francisco.
But Tony Bennett came back in a big way, winning the Album of the Year Grammy for this MTV Unplugged album.
This is the greatest moment in my whole musical career and the greatest moment in my life. I want to thank you very, very, very much for voting for me, and I love being with all of you, and I can't even, there are no words. It's such a victorious feeling to sing good American music and have this happen. Thank you very much.
Along with newcomer Crow, a host of female pop vocalists took top honors, including Bonnie Raitt for Best Pop Album, Melissa Etheridge for Best Female Rock Performance, and Mary Chapin Carpenter for Best Country Album. And heavy metal group Soundgarden took away the prize for Best Hard Rock Performance.
I think when it comes to Grammy voting, I think you're dealing with a lot of acts that have huge profiles when it comes to voters, you know. I think there's a certain percentage of them that really have listened to what it is that they're voting for, and I think, you know, also there's a percentage that are going to vote for a band or an artist that they've heard a lot about or heard a lot of positive things about, or, you know.
That report by Sandra Gaudenzi. We say thank you to Dougee Dimensional, Chris Long, Stephen Armstrong. And that's all from us here at the Star Cafe. I'm Penny Smith. Goodbye.